Hi Blaine friends, it's Mrs. Cafaro. I miss everybody and I'm really excited that I get to read you a story today. So the story that I chose to read to you is called Corduroy and it's written and illustrated by Don Freeman. So before we read the story, there are a few words that I want to introduce to you that you're going to hear when you're reading the story. And the first word is corduroy, which is the bear's name in the story, also the title of the book, but corduroy is actually a material. It's a really thick, heavy fabric that has ridges. And the reason that the story is called Corduroy and the bear's name is Corduroy is because he's wearing overalls made from that fabric. Another word that we're going to see in the story is yanked. And yanked means to pull on something very hard. And then the last word that we're going to see in the story is wandered. And wandered means to walk around with nowhere to go. Okay, so as we're reading today, we are going to stop and answer and ask questions about key details. And key details are those very important parts of the story. And by asking and answering questions, it helps us to understand the story better. Okay, so we're going to start reading Corduroy, written and illustrated by Don Freeman. Corduroy is a bear who once lived in the toy department of a big store. Day after day, he waited with all his other animals and dolls for someone to come along and take him home. The store was always filled with shoppers buying all sorts of things, but no one ever seemed to want a small bear in green overalls. Then, one morning, a little girl stopped and looked straight into Corduroy's bright eyes. "Oh, Mommy," she said, "look, there's the very bear I've always wanted." "Not today, dear," her mother sighed. "I've spent too much already. Besides, he doesn't look new. He's lost a button on one of his shoulder straps." So as I'm reading, I'm asking myself a question about one of the details that I read, and I'm wondering, why didn't the little girl buy Corduroy if he was exactly what she'd always wanted? And some of the details that I read in the story that helped me think about that answer is that her mother said she didn't have enough money to buy the bear, and she also thought he looked old because he was missing a button. So let's continue reading. Corduroy watched them sadly as they walked away. "I didn't know I'd lost a button," he said to himself. "Tonight I'll go and see if I can find it." Late that evening, when all the shoppers had gone and the doors were shut and locked, Corduroy climbed carefully down from his shelf and began searching everywhere on the floor for his lost button. So I'm going to stop there and ask you a question now. And I want you to think about, why did Corduroy climb down from the shelf? And after you think about that, I want you to think, what do you think he's going to do? And why? What makes you think that? Suddenly, he felt the floor moving under him. Quite by accident, he'd stepped on an escalator, and up he went. Could this be a mountain, he wondered? I think I've always wanted to climb a mountain. He stepped off the escalator and reached the next floor, and there before his eyes was the most amazing sight. Tables and chairs and lamps and sofas and rows of beds. "This must be a palace," Corduroy gasped. "I guess I've always wanted to live in a palace." He wandered around admiring the furniture. "This must be a bed," he said. "I've always wanted to sleep in a bed." And up he crawled on the large, thick mattress. All at once he saw something small and round. "Why, here's my button," he cried, and he tried to pick it up. But like all the other buttons on the mattress, it was tied down tight. He yanked and pulled with both his paws until pop! Off came the button, and off the mattress Corduroy toppled. Bang! Into a tall floor lamp. Over it fell with a crash. Corduroy didn't know it, but there was someone else awake in the store. The night watchman was going his rounds on the floor above. When he heard the crash, he came dashing down the escalator. So now I'm wondering, why did the night watchman hear a crash? And what was it? "Now, who in the world did that?" he exclaimed. Somebody must be hiding around here. He flashed his light under and over sofas and beds until he came to the biggest bed of all, and there he saw 2 fuzzy brown ears sticking up from under the cover. "Hello," he said. "How did you get upstairs?" The watchman tucked Corduroy under his arm and carried him down the escalator and set him on the shelf in the toy department with the other animals and dolls. Corduroy was just waking up when the first customers came in the store in the morning, and there, looking at him with a wide, warm smile, was the same little girl he'd seen only the day before. "I'm Lisa," she said, "and you are going to be my very own bear. Last night I counted what I saved in my piggy bank, and my mother said I could bring you home." "Shall I put him in a box for you?" the sales lady asked. "Oh, no, thank you," Lisa answered, and she carried Corduroy home in her arms. She ran all the way up 4 flights of stairs into her family's apartment and straight to her own room. Corduroy blinked. There was a chair and a chest of drawers, and alongside a girl-sized bed stood a little bed just the right size for him. The room was small, nothing like the enormous palace in the department store. "This must be home," he said. "I know I've always wanted a home." Lisa sat down with Corduroy on her lap and began to sew the buttons on his overalls. "I like you the way you are," she said, "but you'll be more comfortable with your shoulder strap fastened." So now I'm wondering, and maybe you can answer this, what happened after Lisa took Corduroy home? "You must be a friend," said Corduroy. "I've always wanted a friend." "Me too," said Lisa, and gave him a big hug. Okay. So today we read the story of Corduroy, and we learned and thought about asking and answering questions about key details, because this will help us to understand the story better. So I was thinking if you wanted to extend the story and do a little bit more with Corduroy, that maybe you could write about a favorite stuffed animal and the adventures that you have with that animal.